Outburst, a Todd Mills Mystery, Book 4. Author, R.D. Zimmerman. Publisher, Scribble Pub, Minneapolis, Minnesota, 1998. Narrator, Eric Aust. Chapter 35. Todd was slow getting to the station that morning, mostly because he'd slept like crap the night before, jazzed by the satellite interview with Ron Revelle, worried about Rollins. He hadn't been the least bit tired and ended up reading until the early hours. He pretty much knew how he was going to do the story, how he was going to edit down the interview for the 5 o'clock. He'd already spoken with both a producer and an assignment editor, telling them how great Revelle was, and Todd was pretty sure the piece would be one of the top leads tonight. That, however, wouldn't be fully decided until the editorial meeting later this morning. Now, driving out of the garage, he steered down the ramp, one hand on the wheel, the other holding his third cup of coffee. Coming around the building and reaching the road, he turned left on Dean Parkway, a tree-studded stretch of roadway with meandering bike and pedestrian paths. 2 blocks later, he turned left, heading up a small hill toward Cedar Lake, and that's when he saw it. The Lake's Real Estate Agency's sign hanging in front of a one-story house. Staring at the listing agent's name on the for sale sign, he realized why, of course. Her name had seemed familiar. He'd never met her. They probably didn't even have any friends in common. But he'd seen her name on a handful of signs, just like this one. Of course, Maureen Shee was a real estate agent. He veered immediately to the right and slammed on the brakes. Reaching into his briefcase, which sat on the passenger seat, he pawed through his papers until he found it. Her number. He glanced at it, then at the small number at the bottom of the sign. They were one and the same. Yes, a real estate agent. No wonder she promised her very, very best to call back within the hour. That is, if you were a buyer and not a reporter. Well, screw that. Todd flipped open his phone and dialed the main number at the top of the sign. A woman answered. Good morning, Lakes Real Estate. How may I help you? Can you tell me where you're located? Certainly, sir. We're in the Lakes Village shopping mall on Lake Street. Exactly, thought Todd. The strip mall, not 3 blocks from his condo. And is Maureen Shee in this morning? He asked. Yes, she is. Would you like me to connect you? No, that's okay, he said, quickly hanging up. He spun around and, driving considerably faster, headed back down to Dean Parkway and out to Lake Street. He turned right past his building, continued on, and steered into the strip mall. Not more than 3 minutes later, Lake's Real Estate was right next door to a bakery Todd had shopped at a handful of times. Todd parked and went in, swinging open the glass door and entering a reception area filled with a couch and a handful of large plants. An attractive woman with blondish hair and brown glasses looked up from the reception desk. Good morning, she said with a pleasant smile. Since he'd just spoken to her, Todd lowered his voice slightly and said, I just drove by a house that you all are selling. I believe Maureen Shee is the listing agent. Would it be possible to speak with her? Oh, of course. Without further question, the woman picked up her phone and called back to Maureen's office, and within less than a minute, after all, it wasn't every day that a potential buyer simply walked in off the street. A trim, attractive woman appeared with thick black hair and wearing black pants and a grayish top. She bore a smile that seemed strained. Hi, I'm Maureen, she said, extending her hands. Thanks so much for coming in. Are you looking for a house? Hi, Maureen, he hesitated, then said, I'm Todd Mills? Her smile vanished and her hand fell to her side. Oh, I'm sorry about Mark. Not at all, please. She looked away, mumbled. And I'm sorry for just stopping in like this, but I'd very much like to speak to you. Do you have a couple of minutes? I'm sorry, but I'm very busy. Mark's death has been very difficult for me, and this is my first time in the office in a couple of days, and please, it's important. Obviously, she looked up at him. But I thought they already caught the guy who did it. They have a suspect, that's all. She thought for a moment, then without a trace of enthusiasm said, Okay, but I really don't have much time. Todd followed her down a short hall to the first door, which led into a small conference room filled with a table and chairs and prints of antique cars on each of the four walls. Maureen sat down and pointed to one of the seats opposite her. Look at Mr. Mills, she began. I'll be real frank about this. I didn't call you back because I don't want Mark's death sensationalized. Of course not. Neither do I. Assessing that he needed to be just as frank, he said, Please don't forget that I was right there, that I witnessed the shooting. I've done a number of stories on it already, but trust me, it hasn't been easy. She stared at them, seemed about to ask a question, and Todd knew exactly which one, then caught herself. Trying to keep this going, Todd said, If I understand correctly, you two were very good friends. Who told you that? A friend of his. Oh, satisfied Maureen paused, looked away. Well, we were close, very close. We saw each other only about once a week, but we talked every day, sometimes twice a day. He was my pal, my bud. I see. Do you know how great it is for a straight woman to have a gay man as a best friend? I mean, there was no sexual tension between us, just friendship and love. Of course, I hardly met him, but he seemed like a great guy. The best, starting to cry even as she smiled. She wiped a tear away, then said, I was helping him look for a house. That's what he really wanted, his own place. Maureen, was Mark dating anyone? Oh, brother, that's a complicated question. What do you mean? A guy as gorgeous as him could have had anyone. I mean, really. Gay men and straight women were always hitting on him. Instead, he goes and falls for that jerk. Todd tried to rein it in, his excitement, softly asking, Oh, this stupid closet case. Some guy who travels here on business. Did you ever meet him? No, never. I wanted to, but Mark said the guy was too scared, that it was too big a step. She shook her head. It was all wrong. A guy as great as Mark deserved the best. Someone who was around all the time, not some uptight jerk who was only around once a month. What about his name? Did Mark ever tell? Russ. Russ? Yeah, that's all Mark ever told me. That he was going down to the Redmont because Russ was in town. I have no idea of his last name. Excellent, thought Todd. That should be enough to find him, definitely so. Particularly with Rollins' aid. That might be very helpful to the police, Todd said. Do you mind if I pass that along? Not at all. Not if you think it might help. Anything else? No, not really. Listen, I don't know what you're looking for. Neither do I. But I sure as hell hope that once you find it, you treat it with care. I promise I will. He thanked her again, then started to get up, and then, reticent, but needing to know, she asked it, the question she'd earlier stuffed and the one they always asked. Mark wasn't in a lot of pain, was he? He didn't suffer, did he? No, not at all. It happened very quickly. I'm not even sure he knew. Thanks. Leaving her sitting in the small conference room, Todd had no idea where this information would take him, but he had a gut feeling it would be someplace interesting. This might be just a piece, a singular part of a puzzle, but the more anyone understood about Mark Forrest, the more quickly this might be wrapped up. Or so he hoped. Emerging from the cool air conditioning, he stepped into the day that was rapidly growing more hot and humid. On the early morning news, he'd heard that a huge storm was blowing in from the Dakotas, and Todd didn't doubt it. Not one bit. Something was going to break. He was just reaching into his pocket for his keys when he heard steps behind him. Todd, he turned, saw Maureen Shee pulling her dark hair from her face and shielding her eyes from the bright sun. Yes, he said. Well, there's just one other thing. She looked across the parking lot, grinned, then looked back at him. I don't know if they really did or not, but Mark said he and Russ always tried to stay in one particular room at the Redmont. Which one? The Princess Suite? No, she replied with a small laugh. Room 469? Todd couldn't hide his own amusement, but in the moment that he groped for some witty reply, a distant phone started ringing. Both Maureen and he glanced back toward her office, then turned and looked at his Grand Cherokee. "That's mine," he said, fumbling to open the door. "Thanks again, Maureen." "You bet." Pulling open the door as quickly as he could, Todd leaned across and grabbed his phone from the passenger seat. He said, "Todd Mills?" "Listen up," said a deep voice. "It's me. Don't tell anyone I called. Just get your ass down to City Hall. The main entrance, now. On the fucking double. Got it? And bring one of your camera guys, okay?" "Okay, but I really need to talk to you." "Later. Just get down to City Hall. You're not going to believe it. They're letting Kenny go." A Gay Mysteries audiobooks. I think it is easy to hate a label, but a face humanizes the word. So this effort is twofold. To offer comfort to those like myself that your world didn't end because you don't fit into the view of acceptable society on both sides. And in hopes of helping those with family that are LGBTQ, that it doesn't mean we are aliens from the child they once knew. Reassure them so they can maybe be supportive at the same time, being true to their values.